So that's how we working on land. Labor, as you all are aware, that 44 central laws have been sort of put in 4 buckets. And one of the buckets has already been approved by Parliament. And labor, as you all know, is in the concurrent list. So state governments are also empowered to make those, relax those rules which they can decide upon. So already a couple of state governments have gone ahead, UP, Rajasthan, Telangana, they've gone ahead and liberalized the labor laws and tried to make it more rational, not only for industry, but also for labor. We all realize that labor, we don't have a social security system in the country, so we cannot go on hire and fire. No, that is not the policy of the government. The policy is that both sides should meet and it should be flexible. And it's just that 6 or 7% of organized labor should not kind of hold the whole country to ransom. When 93% of your labor is in the unorganized sector without any social benefits, we have to look at their interest also. So a lot of work is going on rationalizing these labor laws. A lot of you are familiar. We can discuss that later on in the question answer session. Capital. Capital, we all agree, India being a capital scarce country, the rate of cost of capital is very high here. But then there are various schemes being implemented, interest subvention scheme, collateral free loans, and all kinds of credit guarantees are being given. And a very sincere attempt is being made to lower the cost of capital, including, getting foreign exchange and using it for the right purposes. Logistics is another factor which hinders Indian industry. Sometimes, you'll get the argument, you take a product from Chennai to Kanyakumari, it'll take more time than to take it from, let's say, Chennai to Singapore or Malaysia. And that is a problem with us. And you might be aware, a logistics division specifically has been set up in Department of Commerce under the charge of a special secretary. And multimodal connectivity and multimodal avenues of transport are being looked at. And I'm sure when the new national logistics policy comes up, it will smoothen things up and it will ease a lot of infrastructural issues. And to come now to the question of electricity. So electricity is in a way, commercial electricity is subsidizing the electricity to farmers and to the agricultural sector. So the argument standardly given is, if you want to give any subsidy to the agricultural sector, please give them in an open, transparent manner. Please don't sort of subsidize their electricity by making the industry and manufacturing pay a higher rate of electricity than what it should be. And this is a very rational argument, I would think. And a lot of work is going on it. There are a lot of reforms going on in the electricity sector. Non-renewable energy is coming in. Unbundling of electricity has taken place. And, they're looking for avenues where the big demanders of electricity can sort of have a one-to-one equation with the suppliers of electricity and arrive at a mutually agreeable rate. So these are the various factors through which we are struggling to bring down the cost of doing business. And I'm sure in the time to come, this will happen. There's one thing here I would like to emphasize: the amount of interaction with industry through the chambers of commerce, through CII, through FICCI, through SOCHM, through the sectoral chambers of commerce is extremely high and fruitful, I would say. It's the kind of dialogue which takes place between industry and the government is almost seamless. I mean, there's no lag time in the government getting to know of any problems and working on it. You would have seen that in the pandemic period also, the way the government and industry worked together to get this mammoth supply chain of goods and services and pharmaceuticals and what have you moving seamlessly was quite a good exercise. Of course, there were a few hitches, but the way the two arms of the sort of people and the government worked was really phenomenal. And another thing I'd like to emphasize is the very strong leadership being taken by our political leaders. So I can say for Ministry of Industry, Commerce, and for Railways, where our minister is so, his eye is always on the ball, he's always active, he's always open to suggestions, and there's no room for delay. If a thing attracts his attention during the course of a meeting, a number of you would have seen that he'll just pick up the phone and sort it out then and there. So that is the level of efficiency at which the government is working in certain, of course, there are some issues which need to be sorted out, but there's been a paradigm shift in the level of efficiency of the government. And I'm sure a lot of you are aware of that. So that is the cost of doing business. Now let's come to the next item, the ease of doing business. Here, as you all know, India's focus has been to improve the ease of doing business, to bring down the compliance cost of various things, of registering a business, of registering property, of doing various labor laws, of enforcing contracts and stuff like that. And as you all know, we've come down to about somewhere in the 63. The ranking, India's ranking amongst the Committee of Nations is about 63. And we're striving to come down to below 50, which will be a big thing. The argument against, of course, ease of doing business is it's only a survey done on 2 cities, the big cities, Delhi and Mumbai. But now it's going to be extended beyond Delhi and Mumbai to 2 more cities. And the spirit of the ease of doing business is now being sort of looked at, and we're all struggling to improve it. I can give you an example. At the moment, the government is looking at the number of licenses and compliances required to start a restaurant. Somehow it's been found very high, and the very focused attention is being given to how to improve the compliances and make it much easier for restaurants to get going and to get traction on the ground. So ease of doing business, as you know, is a matter of across the ministries. It's not that just Department of Industry handles it. No, Department of Industry coordinates it, but it's a work cutting across all ministries and sectors. All right, so now let me come. I thought, since I'm speaking to a wider audience, let me see and try and think through what is the binding constraint to industrial growth. Let's say if I can list out 9 or 10 constraints: land, labor, compliances, electricity. What is one binding constraint? What is the one factor which is the biggest stumbling block? Which is the, as economists argue the term, which is the binding constraint? So we often discuss this in our ministry, and we've come around to this conclusion that India is a huge country, and you cannot have just one binding constraint across all the industries in all the sectors. So it cannot be land for retail, it cannot be electricity for let's say small scale sector. So you cannot come down to just one binding constraint which is affecting all our industries. The binding constraint will be sector specific and region specific. No, just like, let me give you another favorite example of mine. Joan Robinson, the famous economist, worked in the Niti Aayog somewhere in the 50s. And she made a very good statement. She said, whatever you say about India, the opposite is equally true. So let me quote again. Whatever you say about India, the opposite is equally true. What she meant was India is a huge continental economy. So if you say the roads are not too well developed in Bihar, you go to Sikkim, the roads are very developed. You say the electricity is not there in some state, let's say UP, you go to West Bengal, the electricity is there in a big way. So just to drive home the point, there cannot be one binding constraint across the country. The binding constraints in different places are different. And here, I will like to then argue, if someone asks me the question, that if you're given just one instrument, if you're given the choice of one instrument to improve the industrial scenario and the growth in the economy, what will it be? In a way, if I may use the current term, in these pandemics, we've seen a lot of these mythological series. what is the one Ramban which will sort of boost industrial growth? So there I like to argue, if I have to choose one instrument, it will be industrial clusters. Its clusters can go by the name of SEZs, industrial parks, and what have you. Basically, I would like to argue that the infrastructure in India will take some time to come up to developed country standards or even to Southeast Asian standards. Our roads, our electricity, our transport, our port turnover and time, all these are going to take time. So we have to build enclaves of excellence to improve the infrastructure, to provide our industrialists, small and large, world-class infrastructure. We have to build pockets of excellence. We cannot just have a wide swath of excellent infrastructure across the country. That will take some time to come. That is something ideally we'd like to go and approach, but that's going to take some time. So my one instrument, if someone asks me which is the one industrial policy instrument you would like to push the furthest, it will be industrial clusters. And the government is very seriously into improving industrial clusters. In our department, we have just moved a note on how to upgrade the infrastructure of brownfield clusters. So we have decided, setting up a new greenfield cluster takes time, there are compliances, land issues, and stuff like that. So we've come down to the logic that it's the brownfield clusters which are already there in electronics, in textiles, for small scale and what have you. There, our department will go in, sign a MOU with the people running the clusters and upgrade those clusters to world-class level. So that is one way, we can provide world-class infrastructure to our industrialists, to our manufacturers, provide them good roads, electricity, one-stop clearance, and what have you, marketing, port linkage, everything. So the emphasis with us at the moment is, and we're working very seriously about it in very frank discussions with industry bodies, with the state governments, and they all sort of agree that industrial clusters is the way to go. Industrial clusters, of course, are there in the country. There are about 3,000 odd industrial parks in the country. All that has been mapped by DPIIT. All that is being put on the GPS portal, the land available, the land vacant there. Someone will tell you the 50,000 hectares of land still lying vacant in those industrial parks. All that has been noted, and all that is being dutifully mapped and put in place. There's been a sort of ranking of the various clusters, and all that is now going to be put up along with, sort of one-step window clear for all kinds of clearances to industry to provide a good ease of doing business and to facilitate industrial growth in this country. So that is, just to sort of sum it up, that is my one Ramban for the industry. And now let me just quickly sort of, in a way, conclude by telling you about the new industrial policy which is coming up. So as most of you will be aware that industrial policy in India, the big industrial policy was in 1956, then another one in 1991, then we went in for those big ticket reforms. And now again, in 2020, maybe 21, we'll come up with a new industrial policy. So let me tell you one thing about industry. Industrial policy is not just what Ministry of Industry does. It is also what Ministry of Finance does. It's also what Ministry of Agriculture does. It's also what Ministry of Road does and what have you. So industrial policy is not just the baby of Department of Industry. It is cuts across ministries, and we just sort of pull it in together. So we've been struggling with the new industrial policy for the last about, you won't believe it, about three and a half years. At around December 2018, our industrial policy was ready, done and dusted. It was approved by the Prime Minister's office, Committee of Secretaries, the various boxes you have to tick when a policy has to go through. But at the last moment, it was decided, oh, wait, let the new government come in at the beginning of 2019. Let them take a call on what the new industrial policy should be. So all that effort of 2 years of, jumping through the hoops of doing industry policy was sort of put at one side. And we waited for the next government to come in, of course. And the new government again said, okay, now the earlier industrial policy was more about a vision statement. It was sector agnostic. We talked about improving the environment for business without getting into the specific sectoral strategy. The new government headed by a Prime Minister and a new industry minister said nothing doing. We want specific incentives, proposals for the different sectors. We don't want as the term goes, motherhood and apple pie statement. All those visionary statements can be done by any sort of industry body or some other body. From the industrial policy, what we seek is specific sectors. So again, we went back to the drawing board. We sort of focused on 11 sectors: capital goods, chemicals, electronics, pharmaceuticals, and we've done a lot of due diligence. We met state governments, we met industry bodies, and we finally come up with a draft policy, which we'll be putting up to our ministers by the next week and all. And we hope that it will go through. So, but one stream of argument now is says, do we need an industrial policy? A lot of business people and academicians will tell you the days of industrial licensing are over. You don't have any major licenses for anything except 2 or 3 products. The days of sort of big ticket reforms, which you introduced in 1991 and 56 are over. So do we need a new industrial policy? Because as it is, most of the sectoral ministries, Ministry of Electronics is doing its own electronic policy, textiles is doing its own thing, chemical sector is doing all thing, capital goods is doing its own thing, automobile sector is doing its own thing. So that we hear that argument also. So, we struggle between these two strands. Do we exactly need an industry policy at this point of time when all the sectoral ministries know the broad framework and are working as per the thing? And then we would like to argue, yes, but you need someone to pull these various strands together. Some gentleman who's coming to invest in this country, whether from this country or abroad, should be able to sort of read one policy and at one place find out what is the policy environment, what are the broad incentives which we make available to the industry, and then go ahead and use it. So thinking is coming around to the fact that yes, different ministries are doing their thing, but just like, the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. So let the different ministries, let the capital goods sector be looked after by heavy industries, let the automobile sector be looked after by industries, let the electronics be looked after by METI. But to sort of have an overall sort of confluence, it's very important for DPIIT to chip in and come up with an industrial policy. So that's where the things stand, and hopefully we'll be coming up with it. And I would like to conclude with one last thought, that just like I've been sort of burdened with this question, why is the share of manufacturing in GDP not increasing to its potential? I hope with the current changes in policy and implementation, and with the current environment where India is sort of raising its head and doing its best, this kind of question will become obsolete in the next 5 to 10 years. I'm sure that the share of manufacturing in GDP will rise, and this question that why are we stuck to that share will go down. Because one thing is definitely accepted fact, that without manufacturing growing at a good rate and its share in GDP rising, the growth is not very sustainable. Good employment, sort of good employment is possible, especially for a large mass of people, largely in the industrial sector, in those low-skilled jobs to start with, and then to move up the skill hierarchy. It's very important. For no country in the world has grown without manufacturing sort of initially growing first and then services taking over. India, unfortunately, we jumped straight from agriculture to the services sector primacy. and industry was given a bit of a, go by. But that is one thing which sort of, I would think from Department of Industry needs to be redeemed. And industrial sector has to grow for the sustainable growth of India. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. With your permission, can we take some of the questions from participants?
Yes, please. That's a pleasure.
I have a question with me, Ms. Dr. N.K. Sahu. He wants to know that India is becoming a $5 trillion economy by 2024. So can you provide the projections given the change in situations?
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. So those are aspirational goals, Mr. Sahu. We all need to set targets which are slightly difficult to achieve. And as you very well know, all this scenario has changed. And yes, we are tweaking the projections, and we'll be coming up with it in the industrial policy. So no, let me not just announce it here, but we are struggling with it, and we'll come up in the new industrial policy. Broadly, we had it that 3 trillion will come from services, and 1 trillion from agriculture and allied, and 1 trillion from manufacturing. That ratio also, let's see, and the rate of growth, that will certainly need to be tweaked, and we are doing it. Thank you.
Sir, another question. Okay. Sir, please. There is another question that how Indian manufacturing industries can reduce the cost. The small industry.
ये तो क्वेश्चन वैसे हो गया कि पूरा रामायण बोलने के बाद पूछ रहे हैं कि सीता का. This is a question which will dog the nation for the rest of our lives. तो इसको ये तो बहुत ही गूढ़ सवाल है, इस पे और मनन होना चाहिए, and हम लोग इस पे और करेंगे. And Shabni, let me request you, can I take 3 questions at one time so that will make it life easier? Yeah. 2 or 3 for me, it'll make life easier for me to think on my feet.
Okay.
Mr. Bhal, thank you very much. There is a few questions I have also found, and I'm seeing here in the question answer. They are saying that digitization is helping the country, but then the last mile connectivity somehow involves cost. And at the same time, the cost of transaction is also high here. And he is asking that because cost of transaction is high, so it is adding to the cost of capital. I think it is very important question. So would you like to elaborate on that?
Yes, I will do it. But are there a couple of more questions, or shall I answer this first?
Sir, I have one more question.
Puchiye.
Can we expect a national level policy on Industry 4.0? Mr. Deepesh Rajiv has asked this question.
All right. So that's a very important question on digitization, Mr. Jha. So luckily, just to give a perspective on digitization. So digitization is a technology in which we have leapfrog technology. So people who didn't have landlines, now don't need landlines. We can go straight to the mobile thing. India's fiber optics and all we laid, thanks to the efforts of the Prime Minister and our team. So now the Jandhan, that JAM Trinity, Jandhan mobile, and that Jandhan, Aadhaar and mobile. Now we can provide money straight into the hands and pockets of the poor. As regarding the digital divide, all right, between the rich and the poor, that will take some time, and that will go through. And of course, the last mile connectivity is a problem. We are facing it in the education sector. How will the poor people study at home when they don't have a smartphone? But all those factors, will gradually get over. I'm totally in agreement with you that we should subsidize some of that high transaction cost initially for the marginalized people, for the poor people to get over the thing. Otherwise, we don't want this nation to have a digital divide. But this digital highways, India has embraced it in a big way. Nowhere in the world is the kind of digital money which we are using. Maybe some other countries, but we are much better off than USA, Japan, and a lot of digital activities and the use of data. Thanks to our very enterprising entrepreneurs, we are doing very well in the digital space. And of course, Industry 4.0 is very much in the reckoning. Only day before yesterday, I was in a BRICS ministers meeting, that Brazil, Russia, India, China, South Africa, where the theme is Industry 4.0. So a lot of efforts are going in and using those latest technologies, 3D printing, Internet of Things, additive manufacturing. A lot of that is going on. And in our industrial policy, also we are thinking of having business development service providers for these technology embedded in those clusters. So each cluster, Shravani, we are thinking that we should have these technology providers parked in those clusters so that they can provide it to all the people in those clusters. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
There are a few questions about fossil fuels, Atmanirbhar Bharat, and training related issues. And then importance of skilled workers in attracting FDI. So I think, please.
Yeah, I'll take that. So fossil fuels, obviously, India is doing greatly in the non-renewable energy sector. Thanks to the PM's initiative, we are very good on the solar power sector. On the wind, we are doing very well. About 30% of our energy is now coming from the non-renewable energy sector. So this is it's a fact of truth that fossil fuels are generally going to be phased away. It will take time. It will take for coal to go away. It might take 10, 12 years. But fossil fuels are on their way out, and India is very high on the sort of order of embracing non-renewable energy. Skills, obviously, the Prime Minister, when he came in 2014, introduced that national skills policy, and he always talks about upskilling, reskilling, and things. It is well accepted that we have to sort of embed skill in our education policy. So there's no point just having 10 graduates without any skills. They won't be employed anymore. So a lot of work has gone on. The new education policy, the new sort of skills thing will embed skills as a part of the education policy, and so that we'll have more well-rounded persons who will be doing it. And it's quite true. It's both these sort of virodhabhas, like there's so much unemployment in the country, but you don't get good skilled workers. Regularly, we hear from industry that highly skilled workers ki hame kami hai. And whereas there's a plethora, mass of unskilled workers. So upskilling and skilling is definitely required, and a lot of work is going on to this. Thank you. Is there any question I forgot?
Now, Mr. Bhal, there are few questions related to each other. Like they are asking about that labor cost in India is high. And I think he's talking about the hiring and firing system. Secondly, he's asking how we should reduce the time taken in getting approvals from state governments, central governments, and other agencies for setting up the industry. So I think you can highlight some of the issues which is being taken up by the industry minister.
So let me answer the second question first. How will you reduce the time taken to get various compliances? Now, as you'll know, there's a one-stop single window clearance which is being sort of worked out in Department of Industry, where all your clearances you'll get in a very short time at one place. And this is not like the normal, what you hear of behind the window, there are 2-3 doors and all. No, it's not like that. Here, under the very able and stern guidance of our minister, there's a whole division looking at one-stop window clearance, and you'll soon see it on the ground. And let me tell you, Mr. Jha, that already Haryana, Telangana, Chandigarh have wonderful single window clearances working in their state government. So we are in constant touch with them, and we are trying to incorporate the best practices in the national level single window clearance cell also. And of course, labor cost being high, again, now labor cost being high will depend on which industry you're working, what is the level of skilled worker you have, what is your ideal scale and size. So those are very specific questions. And some people will tell us, no, labor cost is not an issue. Of course, some other company will come and tell us labor is the issue. But we appreciate it's the issue. And because of the various labor laws, you don't go beyond a size. One of the problems with Indian industry is the small size. 99% of our industry is in the MSME sector. But more than 6.5 crore people are in the MSME sector. We need bigger companies. We need scale to standardize, to export products in the global market. It is required. So I appreciate, being small is a disadvantage. And sometimes you're small just to avoid those various compliances, including the labor laws. But all that has been brought into the vision of the government, and they're struggling to ease everything, including reducing the labor costs. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bhal. There is another question, I think that we will take last. That is, whether there is any apprehension that Industry 4 will reduce the job in the industry.
That's a very valid question, and I have a very well-rehearsed answer to that, because we hear that question all the time. So just when the computer industry came into India, all the people were worried, oh, that will reduce employment and what have you. The bankers went into a protest, but that didn't happen. Similarly, we are of the firm belief in our interaction with industry and industry association that once Industry 4.0 comes in, there will be a bit of upheaval initially in the labor market, where they'll say that robots will come in and mechanization will come in and reduce labor. But simultaneously on the side, it will increase the demand for labor in some accompanying sectors, and the overall growth in the economy will increase, and it will have a multiplier effect on labor. So we are of the firm opinion that it will not reduce labor, and India especially, we will not choose any such sort of technology which drastically cuts labor in a big way. No, it will be tweaked to suit our requirements, and labor is of paramount importance to us, and we will certainly protect the interests of labor. Thank you.
There is again the same questions, that why our manufacturing share in GDP is sticking around 15% for so long.
As I said, I hope when my son starts working and, when he reaches my age, he'll be able to answer that question in a more positive way. Right now, because of if you ask me in one line, because of the high cost of doing business due to various reasons, and because of, ease of doing business not being what it is, our share, and we are where it is. And of course, it brings you the thing that services is growing at a faster rate. Even if industry is growing, see, we are the 6th or 5th largest manufacturing nation in the world. Our automobile sector, our pharmaceuticals, our IT sector is very good. It's not that we are that bad. I'm just saying relatively to the services and agriculture sector, our share is not growing. So it's also a question of relativity. Of course, there's a much more potential for manufacturing to grow, but let us not ignore the fact that we are the 5th or 6th largest manufacturing nation in the world. We can make everything, from desktop to mobile phones to planes to what have you. We make everything in the world. Atmanirbhar Bharat will go and make even more. Of course, Atmanirbhar Bharat is not being isolationist. As Prime Minister always argues, it's not to stay in isolation, it's to engage. Atmanirbhar is to engage the world in stronger and more resilient terms. So you answer and look at it from a position of strength. So automobiles, pharmaceutical, electronics, everything, we're looking at it in a very strategic manner, and we're going to make ourselves more Atmanirbhar. And where imports are not required, furniture, ACs, and toys and all. So we're trying to curb imports through tariff and other non-tariff measures. Thank you.
There are a few questions also about training program and the government's initiative in providing training. If you allow me, I will answer that. I just want to inform the participants that Ministry of Industry, Ministry of MSME, its organization in India, and the state government department, they provide lot of training for MSMEs, and that too free of cost. So far, National Productivity Council is concerned, we are also providing a lot of training, and those are also very, free of cost. And recently, we have organized for MSME and banking sector, how banking sector is going to help MSME, and that has been a very good webinar. We are going to soon put it on the YouTube also. Then we had also organized one webinar on the Technological Development Fund. The point I'm saying that you please keep looking at our webinar, upcoming webinar. You will find a lot of webinar that too free of cost for MSME sector exclusively, and these are very very important and practical advice for the MSME sector. I think now we have almost covered all the questions, and I will also request all our participants to keep sending us the question. We will continue to answer it from Mr. Bhal and from other speakers. And at the end, if everything is right, I think now we are going to finish. Then I should congratulate and thank Mr. Bhal for giving us such a valuable information and policy initiatives taken by the government. I am also hopeful that we will again get you back on this webinar, on this platform, and our participants will be happy to listen to you again. So thank you very much. Thank you all the participants.
Thank you, sir. And thanks to the participants.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, everyone. Before we conclude the session, I would like to tell you, everyone, that tomorrow we have another session on the gem and jewelry sector. And the speaker is a senior economic advisor, Mrs. Rupa Datta, Department of Consumer Affairs, Government of India. So you all are requested to join tomorrow also. I'll share the all joining link to everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.